Okay, we won't. I do have a seabird talk prepared for you, and if anybody thinks I've gotten something wrong, please speak up. I'm happy to be interrupted, or even if there's a burning question, you're welcome to ask it as we go, or we can do some questions at the end if you like as well. Anyway, so I'm going to share my screen and show you some seabirds because that's why you're here, right? Okay. So you should see a very nice little pigeon guillemot here in breeding plumage. Many different kinds of birds can be considered seabirds. It's really quite amazing the variety there are. Geese and ducks, some of which you'll also see on freshwater, loons and grebes, cormorants, alcids. Did I tell you there's going to be a test? Pelicans, gull-like birds, tube noses, best name, and even shorebirds could be considered seabirds. I'm going to start with the geese and ducks, something that you may be familiar with. This is a brant goose. This is one of the smallest geese that we have around here and is almost entirely marine, very rarely seen on fresh water. In fact, one that was on fresh water here in Victoria a couple of weeks ago, got people on the phone. Hey, I've got a brant on a reservoir, right? It's really quite unusual. This species was almost hunted out of existence in the early 1900s, I think, and even earlier. And they're doing okay now. They're recovering quite a bit, but they do really rely on eel beds for their food and not being disturbed. And it's certainly a lot of fun for dogs, apparently, to run through these flocks of birds when they do come to rest and feed along our shores. One of the geese that you'll really only see on saltwater. Of course, you're familiar with the Canada goose. I don't have to say much about that one. It is a bird that we do have here in Victoria now in very big numbers, not because of any kind of natural growth of their populations, but rather that they were introduced here and many other places as hunting stock. Before 1970, the highest that we had on the Christmas bird count was 125, and now we routinely have over 5,000. This is a cackling goose, and you may be going, didn't you just show me one of those? Looks kind of like a Canada goose. In Washington, I know that you have a lot more cackling geese than you actually have Canada geese. And if you're wondering what the differences are, well, there you go. We have a Canada goose in the back and a cackling goose in the front. It looks just like a little bitty baby Canada goose. Some of them are kind of intermediate between these two sizes, but the cacklers are always smaller than the larger Canada geese. Mostly too at the darker breast, whereas especially these introduced large Canada geese have a very pale breast. Greater white-fronted goose. I will, I can't say I've come recently to birding now because I've been doing it for about 30 years, but bird names are kind of crazy sometimes. And I'm sure some of you would look at the breast of this bird and think, well, it doesn't have a white front. The white front refers to just that little circle of white right around the front of the face. This is a true native bird, migratory bird, also known to hunters as speckle belly. And we see them here in Victoria only in the wintertime. Snow geese, this is something that, depending on where you live, they're rare or they're not. A lot of them in California, and they migrate up the coast. They go over to Vancouver, over to Rifle and Boundary Bay, but we don't get many of them here. What you'll often see is the flocks going over, and a lot of them are migrating south right now. So if you hear some kind of weird sound way up in the sky, have a look up. You might be seeing snow geese heading south for the winter. If you are over at Rifle, you might see a lot of snow geese. When they take off like this, it's hard to make out even the individuals. Do you notice that they are white with black wingtips? That's a recurring theme amongst a lot of birds, and snow geese have it in droves in this particular picture. The ducks are able to do both salt and fresh water. Now, if you know anything about duck behavior, you're probably recognizing this as a bit of a courtship ritual going on here. We have a lovely couple in the front, and in the back, there's a fella trying to steal his girl, putting on quite the display. This is, in fact, happening in the wintertime, not in the spring. A lot of the ducks go through what looks like courtship in the fall as part of a pair bonding experience. So they'll pair up in the fall and stay together over the winter and then head off to the breeding grounds together. How romantic. But the guys, they just might try and see if they can horn in on this. You can see this is, I think, just such an amazing picture because the male in the background, the competitor here, has done some amazing things with his neck and with his feathers to make them into a total different shape to get the attention of the female. And it looks like they're like maybe she's checking them out. A lot of behaviors like sky pointing and scooting along the water with their faces down, you can observe courtship behaviors even this time of year. So if you're out around some ducks, pay attention to what they're doing too. It can be quite hilarious. We have a couple of goldeneye species here. This one is a Barrow's goldeneye. The former one was a common goldeneye. This one is less common around the area. It has that really cool crescent shape on the front of the face here. And the female looks very, very much like the common goldeneye female. Let's go back there, check her out. See, very similar, but check out the tip of her bill there. She's just got a little bit of orange on the tip of her bill, whereas the Barrow's goldeneye female, her whole bill is orange. So that really helps in trying to separate the two of them. One thing about the seabirds is that most of them really are black and white, and you might get a few shades of brown and gray in them, but you don't get the diversity of color that you see in a lot of other birds, at least for most of the year. So you have to look sometimes for little teeny features in them. The bufflehead is a sea duck, also can be found on fresh water. I put them in my category of Art Deco ducks. The male on the left is particularly striking with his very bold black and white plumage. But if you catch it in the right light, it's actually really iridescent. And so, it might be purple, it might be green, it might be a little bit of both. Very flashy guy there. And the female is really cute. And those white spots on her cheek, when viewed from the back, look like false eye spots. And as educators, I know that you've come across a lot of animals that have false eye spots to help deter predators. I don't know if that's the case with these guys, but it can't hurt, right? More ducks. The common merganser is a duck that breeds locally on Vancouver Island and probably in your areas as well. Not a lot, right? They do tend to go north as well. This is a male and a female, again, performing a courtship ritual. He's sky pointing, she's stretched out over the water, and they're communicating their affection for each other. We also have red-breasted mergansers here that are very similar looking. On the right, I have a male red-breasted merganser on the top and a common merganser on the bottom. And the difference is fairly obvious here, right? Obviously, the red-breasted merganser has quite the do. It almost looks like a kingfisher head. So easy to tell apart from the male common merganser. On the left, I have the females of both. And although the top one is a little straggly, she can look a lot like the bottom one as well. Both of the mergansers have the spiked hairdo in the females. One of the things to look for, though, is how the feathers on the neck, the colors meet. On the common merganser, on the bottom here, it's quite an abrupt differentiation between the white of the neck and the orange of the head. Whereas on the red-breasted merganser, it's more rough. Now that I've told you that, how are you going to remember it? I like to use letters. So C for common, for a clear line, and R for red-breasted, for a rough line to tell the difference between those female mergansers. Another one of the Art Deco ducks is the harlequin duck. An amazing swimmer. This one loves rough water. And in the wintertime, we'll find them all along our rocky shores, rarely on a sandy beach. Occasionally, they might come up on a sandy beach, but look for big wave action and rocky shores to find the harlequin ducks. That's the male in the back, the female in the front. Again, with the eye spots, right? I think we've got a trend going here. In the spring, they will leave the coasts and go up into the mountains, where the water is flowing rapidly through the rivers and streams up there, and that's where they'll breed. They don't like it to be calm. They like it to be rough, and they show it in their bones. Apparently, if you some of the biologists that have gone and looked at their bodies, the specimens that have been preserved in museums where there was a skeleton involved, they've found broken bones that have healed that these birds have likely obtained by being smashed against rocks, either on their breeding grounds or on their wintering grounds. But you'll generally find them where there's a lot of action in the waves. Art Deco, don't you think? What a beautiful duck. These guys could be considered beautiful or maybe not so beautiful, but very striking either way. These are scoters. We have three different kinds of scoters that we see around the Pacific Northwest. The most common is the surf scoter. I was amazed when I saw what they were eating one day. Can you see what they've got in their mouths here? These guys are eating clams whole, just swallowing them down because, of course, they don't have any teeth, and their bills are not strong enough to break through a clamshell, but their gizzards are. So they actually swallow them whole, get them into their digestive system, and the gizzard grinds these clams. Can you imagine muscles inside your body strong enough to grind these clamshells into little bitty bits so that you can have the meat that's inside of them? I was really impressed to see surf scoters doing this. I've even seen a mallard doing it. So it's not just these seabirds that will take whole clams. Boy, what did they've got a tough digestive system. Another scoter that we see around here is the white-winged scoter. And all of these scoters, when they're on the water, are quite quiet most of the time. They can speak, but they are often just going about their business. But as soon as they take off, you can actually hear the wings whirring on them. And anytime I'm out and I hear the wing of the sound of that whir, I check out to see it's usually a flock of scoters taking off. The white-winged scoters, the males have that nice little Nike swoosh around the eye, but the females do not. Black scoters used to be a lot more common around here. They're one that we've really seen the numbers decline, and now black scoters end up on the rare bird alert in Victoria. There are some areas where they still are more abundant. The male has that yellow knob on his bill, hard to miss. The female has this white face patch, but there are some others. Even young female surf scoters can look a lot like this. They're a lot smaller than the surf and the white-winged scoters, and they don't have really the scoter shape of the forehead. Like if you look at the female here, you can see it quite clearly that she's got a forehead. When you look at the scoters, the other scoters, it's their forehead kind of just slopes right into their bill. The long-tailed duck is arguably one of the most beautiful ducks that we do have here. A duck that you will not see on freshwater, as far as I know. I've certainly never seen one on freshwater anywhere. They are a sea duck, sea duck. And their plumage changes quite a bit over the course of the year. When they're in breeding plumage and the male has these lovely long plumes on his tail, it's a very striking bird. But you often have to get a little bit away from the shoreline to really have good looks at them. Last spring, one of our eagle wing birding trips went out to Saturna Island and stumbled across about 2,500 long-tailed ducks in one big raft. I don't think anyone on board had ever seen so many in one place. It was amazing. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we have the good luck to be the winter home for a lot of birds. And when it comes to seabirds, that often means we get the less spectacular plumage. For instance, the common loon is a beautiful, beautiful bird. They are stunning with their bright red eyes and their iridescent green heads and the bold patterns on them. When we get to have them, they're more like the ones in the bottom here. You can still get a hint that it is a common loon, first of all, because it's a big bird. It has this huge bill, and You notice just that patch on the throat where it's coming up the side that will eventually form that white patch on the side of the neck in breeding plumage. But yeah, most of our winter birds here, I'm afraid, are not as spectacular as their courtship and spring version of them. Pacific loons quite abundant here. Again, the breeding plumage at the top here, kind of a pearl gray on the back of the head and the neck, and real again a boldly patterned bird. But in the wintertime, kind of plain. One of the hints here is to look for a much thinner bill than the common loon. You can see how heavy that bill is and how much more dainty that this one is. And yeah, they're just kind of plain. And also look at the angle of the bill there. It's more or less straight out, and they have this little chin strap underneath their neck. But a bird that you might just go right on by in the wintertime. The red-throated loon is very similar looking to the Pacific loon in the wintertime, and nothing like the Pacific loon really in the summertime, with that nice little red patch, which will appear black an awful lot of the time, unless you just happen to get the light right on it for it to show up as red. In the wintertime, they could be mistaken for a Pacific loon, but their bill is usually paler and they tend to carry it pointing upwards a little bit, sometimes about a 45-degree angle. The yellow-billed loon, unsurprisingly, has a yellow bill. The winter version looks just like the Pacific loon, except for the color of the bill. Or sorry, not the Pacific loon, the common loon, except for the color of the bill. It will also have that white patch on its side. This one is transitioning, and this is a very rare sight. This, a loon up on the ground like this, they can't really walk. Their feet are very far back on their bodies, and it's very hard for them to move about on land. So if you have a loon on land, unless it's breeding, there's probably something wrong with it. This one was out at Saanich and Spit in Victoria several years ago, and it came ashore. It would go into the water and swim, but it would come ashore and rest a lot. And so we figured it wasn't well. But the good news is that the last time it was seen, it was out on the water and swimming away. So we think that it may have recovered from whatever ailed it, and it was a great opportunity to get to see one up fairly close. The grebes do the same thing to us. They come to us in winter looking kind of plain, even though they've got this secret other life. The horned grebe is a little black and white and gray grebe in the winter, but sometimes as we get into spring, we'll start to see them putting on their fancy plumage before they go off to the breeding grounds. And they can breed farther south than here. It's not all north, right? They're among the species that go inland to breed. So from the coast inland rather than north in some cases. To birds going uphill, like up into the mountains, is very similar as going north in terms of climate and food sources and such. So some of them do go north, but some of them also go in to the mountains. The eared grebe, same thing. Now that you're going to go, wait a minute, what's the difference here? The pictures actually show a better difference than you usually will see. Notice where the crown on that winter horned grebe is. It's back behind the eye. The peak of the head is behind the eye. In the eared grebe, the peak is at the front. So you'll notice that it will look a little bit more heavy in that direction. And boy, they go from nothing to spectacular. Every year they do this, males and females. Redneck grebe in the winter does not have a red neck, but in the spring and summer it does. Western grebes are the biggest of the grebes that we have here, and they're quite a big seabird. They are often in rafts, sometimes of just a few birds, but sometimes hundreds of western grebes will be together. And when they've got their necks up, they seem very, very tall. When they're sleeping, they do not. That upper picture is a western grebe in its resting posture. And when you've got these on the water, it just looks like lumps floating on the water. And often the whole flock will be like that. You'll have to wait until one of them pops their heads up. A bright red eye, and notice that the black goes below the eye. It actually comes down below that red eye. A very similar looking bird is a Clark's grebe. It's about the same size and from a distance looks very much the same. But notice in this bird, this the white goes above the eye. It also has a different colored bill. See how orange that one is? Whereas this one is more a yellow greeny color, more a straw color, and an orange bill for the Clark's grebe. We have three kinds of cormorants that we routinely see in the Pacific Northwest. And of course, they look a little bit different when they're young and when they're older, and they look a little bit different in the breeding versus non-breeding season, just to keep you on your toes. The double-crested cormorant is, I'd say, the most numerous around here. And this is a young one. It still has some of the pale coloring on the top of its chest here. That will go away and it will look perfectly black by the time that it's got its full adult plumage on. They can be quite aggressive, even to each other. And I don't know about you, but I would not want to be picking a fight with something with a bill that looked like that. The double-crested cormorants build these cool haystack nests on top of islands, and they'll also build nests in trees. So if you have cormorants nesting in trees around you, they are undoubtedly going to be double-crested cormorants. But these stacks are amazing. When you think about how many trips they must make to make these very tall stacks. When DDT was controlling, devastating, really, not controlling, the raptor population, birds like cormorants and gulls really did well because their main predators were gone. And since the eagles have recovered now, we're finding that a lot more of these colonies of cormorants are starting to struggle a bit because the eagles come in, scare the birds off their nests, take the young or the eggs, and can really just cause a lot of panic. The cormorants themselves are not always loved. If you happen to have a cormorant colony in your neighborhood, you may have noticed trees dying just from the excretion of so many birds. So it's a balancing act for sure to have a healthy population of birds like cormorants when they may not always be loved so much by the people that live near them. The pelagic cormorant is the smallest of the cormorants, and it has a very thin neck and a very, very thin bill. So looking for a smaller bird with that thin bill is going to be your clue all year round. In the breeding season, they also develop these white patches on their flanks, and they are quite obvious when they are flying around. They will nest in hollows in rocks or crevices, just like this bird is sitting in one right here, often right on the side wall, the walls of a cliff. All that white stuff is guano, and so you can see why some people might not want to have a cormorant colony right in their backyard because it doesn't just look interesting; it smells kind of interesting too. This is from Mandarty Island, as were those haystacks where all three species of cormorants nest. The Brandt's cormorant is one that we do have in fairly strong numbers around here, but they weren't known to be breeding until in the area until just fairly recently. And when they get their spring garb on, it's quite impressive here. They not only get the plumes on their back and on the sides of their heads, but their gular patch goes from brown to blue. And if they open their mouth up, it's all blue in there too. So they have these bright blue eyes and this blue patch. The rest of the year, they kind of look just like very plain browny black birds. Of the three cormorants, the only one you're likely to see over land is the double-crested cormorant. So if you're seeing a cormorant in a lake, chances are it will be a double-crested cormorant and not a pelagic or a Brandt's cormorant. The latter two are really strictly marine species. Pigeon guillemots undergo some of the most dramatic changes, I think, in plumage of any of these birds. This is a summer bird, breeding bird, with its red feet and red mouth lining. So if it opened its mouth, you would actually see bright red. And then after breeding is done, they put their good suit away and change into a totally different bird. In the meantime, they are terrific hunters. I have spent some time on Race Rocks as a relief eco guardian, and they nest there in amongst the rocks. They will not go to the nest if you are anywhere near them. They'll just stand out there with their fishes in their mouths. Um, all different kinds. Maybe you can help me identify some of these fish, and wait until you go away before they'll take it into the nest, which is usually fairly close to where you're standing. They work hard, and so when they do take off that breeding plumage, they turn it into something quite comfy, like a pair of pajamas. It's a very soft looking gray, fluffy, flannelly look, which is very dramatically different from their breeding plumage. Their feet still stay reddish, but not as bright red as they are in the summertime. Rhinoceros auklets are called that because of the horn on their bill. And this is a keratin horn that grows each spring and falls off. So this is what they look like during the breeding season and for part of the summer. Male and female grow the horns and the plumes. So this is probably a pair right here. And then they lose that and become quite plain without it. They kind of look lost without that rhinoceros horn. They are closely related to the puffins. In fact, they are a type of puffin, although we don't usually call them puffins. We had a great talk for our birders' night a couple of years ago by someone from Washington who was an expert on puffins and talked both about the rhinoceros auklets and the tufted puffins in the area. They seem to be able to pick up a lot of fish at one time. Right? I don't know if they just go through the school and just grab them all at once, or if they are somehow manage to hold on to some while they pick up others. But any skinny little fish like this, they'll grab a batch of them. They breed in tunnels. In the Pacific Northwest, some of the places that they breed include Protection Island and I believe Whidbey Island, and out at the entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and I think on Smith Island as well. But we don't see too many of them around here. The biggest colony is at the north end of Vancouver Island on Triangle Island, where there are thousands of these. And speaking of puffins, everybody loves puffins, and these are the ones that you are most likely to see in the Pacific Northwest, although there are not large numbers here. Again, Triangle Island at the northern end of Vancouver Island is the best place to go if you really want to see tufted puffins. That bill is like the rhinoceros auklet's bill. It has a bill underneath it, but that bright colored shell is actually just a temporary state, and those will fall off. And they have been used in a lot of First Nations cultures because they'll wash up on the beach and they'll use them to make rattles or decorations for their clothing, among other things. At Smith Island, there is a horned puffin. Maybe more than one, but probably not. Maybe two, but a horned puffin. And it is a target of a number of birders in the area who will spend big money and take boat trips out to try and see the horned puffin. So I felt very lucky on this trip that I was on to actually see the horned puffin out there. The horned puffin is normally in Alaska, much farther north, and rarely gets down to Puget Sound area. But this one has been coming to Smith Island now for a number of years. And a lot of people say, well, isn't it lonely, right? Because it's the only horned puffin. Well, it seems to have taken up with a tufted puffin. I can't tell you which one is the male and which one is the female, but I can tell you that both of them were seen occupying the same burrow on Smith Island this year. A very rare bird to the area is the crested auklet, another bird that is more normally seen in the Aleutian Islands than down here. we actually had one of our banders spot one of these off of Rocky Point some years ago. Now, Rocky Point Bird Observatory is on military land, so people can't come to Rocky Point to look for a bird like this, but people were coming from all over the country to find this bird. So they were renting boats at Pedder Bay Marina, and we were guiding them from Rocky Point on radios, telling them a little bit more to the left, nope, straight ahead. Oh, it just flew, right? Calling out on radios to them so that they could go out and have a look at this bird. It was the first crested auklet for Canada that was alive. There had been one dead one washed up on Chesterman Beach 100 years earlier, but this was the first live crested auklet for the area. Ancient murrelets are around right now in huge numbers. I was out with a friend on a boat this weekend, and we probably saw over 1,500 just around the Sydney Island area, between Sydney and the island, and maybe a little bit out to Portland Island. Just everywhere there were crest or ancient murrelets. Um, some years we don't get very many at all, but the last few years the numbers have been very high. And there's been some other seabirds that we've been seeing that with too, that we normally don't have high numbers, and then we all of a sudden do. This usually means that their food supply has changed. They've the food that is normally out farther into the strait, or farther west along the water, has come inland, or they can't find any and they're just looking for food. The population right now, in our area, seems to be doing quite well, but I always worry when we see an influx, because that means that things are not necessarily good where they should be good. Really cute little guys. When they hit the water, when they fly and hit, they go straight into a dive. And so they don't land on the water, they just plummet right into the water and dive under. The marbled murrelet is smaller than the ancient murrelet, and has a slightly different pattern, a little bit more white on its body. Um, they usually are out on the water in pairs, whereas the ancient murrelets are in larger numbers. Marbled murrelets, even if they're in a group, they seem to be paired off almost all the time. In the summer, they change their plumage and become quite marbled, hence the name, and brownish. And what's really amazing about these guys is, and I'm sure all of you know this, is that they nest in the forests of the old growth forests. Sorry, the old growth forests, where they put their single egg usually on a mossy branch and go out to the ocean every day to get food and bring it back when they have the chick in the nest. Sometimes their nests can be as far inland as 75 kilometers from the ocean. That's probably not a good thing when they come in that far. They usually are much closer to the ocean than that, maybe 15 or 20 kilometers in. Um, but some of them have been known to be much, much farther in. When that chick is ready to fledge, the parents are gone, and the chick just must leave on its own from the middle of a dense forest and find its way to the ocean. We look at these videos of turtles, baby turtles trying to run to the sea. It's kind of the same thing, only a lot farther. It's not 75 meters, it's 75 kilometers, or even 20 kilometers. Can you imagine leaving your nest flying for the first time and having to find your way out to the ocean? If they land on the ground, that'll be the end of them. They won't be able to get back up and fly away. Common murre, another beautiful alcid that we see lots of around the area here. It is one of the most common seabirds that you're going to see. And this is a common murre in breeding plumage. You can see very, very striking, very dark feathers. You get that high contrast going on during the breeding season. Most of these birds are white underneath and black on top. And apparently that's a good survival thing, because things above you that might want to eat you will look down on you, and the black blends in with the ocean very nicely. Things below you will look up and see the white of the sky, and the white underside can blend in with that. So this black and white pattern is not an accident. Another bird that changes quite dramatically in the winter into this. So you can still see some of the basics of it, but it gets the white on its face. It doesn't look nearly as glossy. And they'll be sometimes in between this and this, and so quite difficult sometimes if you're not familiar with birds to know that what you're looking at is a common murre. One of the other things that's really cool about these is while the female sits on the nest and broods the egg, the male is the one that takes care of the chick. So when it leaves the nest, which is up on a rocky cliff, it jumps into the ocean, into the waiting wings of its dad. Well, not quite into the wings, but near its dad. And then its dad will take it from there and teach it how to be a murre. And so in the summertime, you can hear them talking to each other. And the babies kind of have a high pitched tweedly tweedly sort of begging call. And the males have a response that's like leave me alone, right? But you'll often see them out in pairs with one of them much smaller than the other, which is the dads and their babies. In Washington and Oregon, you guys are seeing a ton more pelicans than you used to, and they are making their way slowly but surely up here. The brown pelican immatures look like this, quite brown. Good name for them when they're juvenile or immature. But when they get into their adulthood, they look very, very different. They look more gray, and they have these white heads with the this is breeding plumage, I should add, with the black or brown nape of the neck and the red gullet during breeding season. It's kind of more an orange the rest of the time. A few years back, well, I guess it's more than a few now. I think this was 2013. The Inner Harbor in Victoria had a couple dozen of them there, and people loved them so much they would go out and buy fish, buy herring at the tackle shops, and go down and throw it to the pelicans in the harbor. So they were quite entertaining. We are seeing a lot more of these now, not yet to the numbers that are, say, around Forks or other places in Washington and Oregon, but they're gradually moving northward. So we expect that we'll be seeing more and more of these over time. The American white pelican, on the other hand, is a bird that is here in fairly low numbers and have changed their migration route. There is a nesting colony up near the Chilcotin, and they used to go over Vancouver, it seemed, and not over Vancouver Island. But for probably more than 10 years now, they have been doing a springtime tour where a large flock, sometimes up to 75 birds, will fly over Vancouver Island and then move north and keep going over all the communities. It's almost like they want us to notice them, right? You'll get a report in Victoria, and then another one in Duncan, and then another one up at Qualicum Beach, and then they'll be gone for a few more days. And then they'll turn up again, and people will be reporting them, and you can actually kind of track their movement. They're just biding time until it's time to go up to the Chilcotin, to their nesting grounds up there. You'll notice on the lower left, this bird and some of the others, you can see a noticeable paddle on the bill. This is like the rhinoceros auklet's horn. This is a keratin growth that occurs every breeding season and then falls off later, only to be grown again the next spring. And notice they also have that white and black pattern, the white body and wings, and then the black wing tips. Black feathers are stronger than white feathers, and so by having their wingtips black, it helps them keep them in good shape longer. If they were white, say like even a swan is, you'll notice that the outer feathers start getting quite tattered. Without the melanin in them, they are more susceptible to damage and can really wear out a lot faster. Now we'll transition to gulls. I know everybody's favorite. We have a lot of gulls around here, and although we have divided them into a lot of species, they don't happen to agree with some of our decisions on that. And so the vast majority of our larger gulls that we will see around the Pacific Northwest are affectionately called Puget Sound gulls, or more recently, a lot more people are calling them Olympic gulls, which is a hybrid between Western gulls and glaucous wing gulls. The glaucous wing gull, in its purest form, will have wingtips. That's what looks almost like the tail here, matching pretty closely to the back. The tail is actually right under those wingtips. And so when a gull is standing, what looks like a tail is actually the wingtips, and the tail is tucked in underneath. So the glaucous wing gull is really the bird that you would expect to find in Puget Sound all year round. But now with the infiltration of herring gulls from the north and western gulls from the south, a lot of them are just really mixed up and hard to even figure out sometimes what their heredity is. Of course, the juveniles last for a while. These birds are uh, boy, I think they're 3 to 4 years before they get all their adult plumage, whereas some gulls are only 2 years to get their plumage. But when you're dealing with birds that take that long to get their adult plumage, you can get all sorts of variety that make it very hard to identify them. The California gull is a more streamlined gull than the glaucous wing or western gulls. And one of the things that really helps with them is they have both a black and a red spot on their bill, whereas all the other gulls may have a black spot or may have a red spot. They will not, an adult gull will not have a red and a black spot. Notice that they also have these very dark wingtips with what they call as windows in there, where the white is in the wingtips as well, that can help you with your gull identification. Short-billed gull, another one that helps out a lot. This one used to be called a mew gull, but it's changed its name recently. A short bill, so it's not a bad name for it. And no dots. When they're not adult, they will have some coloration on their bill. The bills start out black and the black disappears, so you have traces of black, but it's, when it's an adult, you get this nice yellow short bill with no dots at all. And again, black wingtips with some white windows. The Bonaparte gull is arguably one of our most attractive gulls. These are small gulls. They're even smaller than the short-billed gull. And we tend to see these in specific locations and also specific times. This one with the lovely pattern on the back here, this is a young Bonaparte gull. When they're in breeding plumage, they look quite different. So this is an adult with its black head, white eye arcs, very black wingtips, and they look kind of pinkish under here, but in breeding season, their legs and feet are quite red. The Heermann's gull, a lot of us think that this might be our most beautiful gull. Orange bill, it's the only one that we have with a really orangey orange bill, kind of a very pearl-like gray body, and then black legs. Most of our gulls have either pink legs or yellow legs. And the Heermann's gull is the only one that comes in with black legs. The young are also quite distinctive in that they're really totally black with this orange bill coming in. That one looks a little bit more yellowish, but again, very different than what you might see with any of the other gulls. The Heermanns and the California gulls are quite interesting in that they come up after breeding. So they breed south of us in California and then move up into the Pacific Northwest in late summer. The herring gull is a gull that's more commonly seen in the north, and it comes down this way too, just to make it difficult for us to figure out which gulls are which. I'm sure that's why it's doing it. It has black wingtips. It's a fairly large gull, and one of the things that people always look for is a pale eye for it. Its bill shape is different than the glaucous wing or western gulls. The Iceland gull, it used to be called the Thayer's gull, another recent name change, known mostly for its bubblegum pink feet, brighter pink than the other gulls. The bill shape is a little bit different, and although it looks like it has black wingtips here, when it's flying, the underside is not black. So if you've got black on the top and gray on the bottom for the wingtips, you might be looking at a Thayer's gull or an Iceland gull. And a gull that we normally won't see in this area, you have to go out offshore to see it, is this beautiful little gull. It's a small gull called the Sabine's gull or Sabine's gull or Sabine's gull. Nobody's really sure how we're supposed to say that, but whatever it's called, it is a beautiful little gull. This is in breeding plumage in the front and a youngster behind it. So it's got that little tip of mustard on its bill, the little yellow tip, the adult, and the youngster hasn't got that yet. Like most of other gulls, it starts out with a black bill. In flight, they also look unlike any other gulls that we have in the area, with this lovely white wedge that appears even on the young bird. So this is a young one here and an adult here, and you can see that wedge is consistent across both of them. Are you ready for the test? No, there is not a test. Sorry. We do get some rare gulls here. This is a Franklin's gull, and it's one that is most recognized by these white eye arcs. The Bonaparte gulls get those white eye arcs too during breeding season, but they don't have them the rest of the year. Their heads are all white. So a dark-headed gull with these white arcs, a black bill, and just the size of it is kind of in between Bonaparte's and the California gull. So a small-ish gull, medium-sized gull that we see a few of every year through the area. It's one that you'll be more likely to find in the prairies. And from the far, far north, the glaucous gull. This is a bird that likes to come to Goldstream in the winter and feed on the salmon carcasses. This is a young bird. The adults actually look more like a glaucous wing gull than you'd expect, but the young ones are almost entirely white with white wingtips here and this two-tone bill, the pink bill with the black tip. They're a big gull. They're bigger than the glaucous wing or any other gull that you'll see. So if you see a very pale gull with this interesting bill that's larger than everybody else, you might have a glaucous gull there. And another rarity that showed up at Esquimalt Lagoon. We'll probably be seeing more of these. This is a young lesser blackback gull. Look at that black bill and how large it is. This was quite a surprise in the area, but I think there's been another one seen since this one, so something that we may start seeing more of. A little bit of a change of topics here. We're still in the gull-like birds, but I want to talk to you a bit about kleptoparasitism. Now, some of you may be familiar with this term. If not, you're familiar with the parts of it. So klepto means to take, and parasite means to, well, to live off the avails of something else. And that's what is happening here. So here we have a parasitic Jaeger on the bottom here. And there's been a feeding frenzy, and the gull at the top has found some fish. And the parasitic Jaeger beneath him wants to get that fish. So he will harass the gull, chase him, and battle him in the sky until the gull gives up the fish. And sometimes the fish is intact, like this one, or sometimes they have been partially digested before they give them up. Either way, the Jaeger will come along and line up to grab it and take that fish. So there you go, kleptoparasitism. Might be a new word for you. We have 3 regularly occurring Jaegers in the area. They're known as skuas in other parts of the world, so you can replace the word Jaeger with skua. This is a parasitic Jaeger, the most common one that we have here. The Pomeran Jaeger is a little bit bulkier bird than that, and the long-tailed Jaeger, which is much less common in the area. All 3 of them do exactly the same thing. They will look for where there's a feeding frenzy going on, and then chase after whoever's there, and try and get what they have. We don't have very many terns in this area. The most notable one is the Caspian tern, with this bright orange red bill and the lovely black cap going all the way over the eyes too. They are quite squawky and really noticeable when they are around. I know that there's been a problem with Caspian terns at the Columbia River, and that they've done some things to try and cull some of them. We're seeing more of them up around Vancouver Island than we used to. It may be that some of them have gotten smart and decided that maybe the Columbia River mouth isn't the right place for them. The last few years, we've had many, many shearwaters in the area. The two most common types are the sooty shearwater and the short-tailed shearwater. They are almost identical, very hard to tell apart. And it used to be that you would tell them apart by what time of year they were showing up. The short-taileds came in smaller numbers and were only here in the in late fall. But now they have started coming in when the sooty shearwaters used to be here. They're called shearwaters because of this little action that they do where they fly and basically cut the water with their wings. There's short-tailed shearwater, very similar looking. There's some subtle differences, um, but uh, but you really have to be an expert to be able to tell them apart without taking the time with the photos. I find that I get them wrong about 90% of the time. They are a member of the tube noses, which includes a few other birds like this northern fulmar. They have very unique bills. A lot of marine birds are able to process salt water as it goes through their system and actually filter it out. They have special salt glands in their heads. And some of these birds also have little bony tunnels on their noses that is where they excrete the cleaned water, or the salt, where they secrete the salt when they're cleaning the water. But they also use these to have a much better sense of smell. So fork-tailed storm petrel, you can see the little tube on its nose there. The Leach's storm petrel, which is very hard to get a picture of. And of course, the albatrosses. We also do have a couple of shorebirds that qualify as seabirds because they spend most of their time on the water. And there's two of them, the red phalarope and the red-necked phalarope. And the cool fact about these birds is that the female is more colorful than the male because it is the male that sits on the nest and broods the eggs and takes care of the chicks when they hatch. I know I promised some resources as well, so I'm going to say there are lots of seabirds and gull book choices, but I would recommend Amarai Ash's North American Gulls, a fairly new book out. He will also be doing a workshop on Vancouver Island in April, no, in March, and you can find out information about that on the Rocky Point Bird Observatory website. Merlin is great for photos as well as sounds. You might be using it. It's an app for your phone. It's free from Cornell University. If you don't have it on your phone, you really should consider getting it. It will help you learn the birds by giving you suggestions for what you're hearing and what you're seeing if you just want to snap a picture. We have partnered with Eagle Wing Birding Tours to actually go out on whale watching boats with the sole purpose of finding birds. We will stop and look at whales too, but if the whales are taking too much time, then we'll just go on and look for the birds. We won't spend a lot of time with the whales. There are programs like the coastal water bird surveys and the beach bird surveys. If you're in the Victoria area, Rocky Point Bird Observatory has a Sea Watch program where you could join in with some experienced people and figure out how to tell those little black specks and what they are. And Nature Victoria in our area also offers weekly walks, actually twice a week. And since there's water all around us, great opportunities to become familiar with at least some of the seabirds you have around there. I know I packed a lot of birds in here. I bet you're glad there isn't going to be a test. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll try and answer any questions you might have, or maybe defer them to someone else in the audience if they might know. Thank you very much, everybody.
Amazing. Thank you. I know for myself, I had no idea there were so many black and white birds, black and white seabirds out there. And so I learned a lot, and I really thank you for opening my eyes to all the birds that are around me. I am not, from the Victoria area, and so I'm still trying to learn all the birds that we have here. So we will open it up for a few questions. Either type them in the chat and we can read them out, or you are free to unmute yourself and put yourself on camera and ask them out loud if that's what you prefer. One of the questions is, do you have a favorite bird out of the ones in your presentation?
Oh, wow. Favorite birds are really tough for me because it's usually the one that I've been paying the most attention to in the few minutes before. I mean, the pigeon guillemots are just little characters. I love them, and the bright red feet are really a lot of fun. But how can you say no to an albatross, right? Like, like birds are so cool, and I love them all. Even those
Awesome.
Jaegers, even those Jaegers.
Even those parasitic Jaegers.
Yes.
Um, Another question came in. Can you talk more about the common murre and the long-tailed duck, and how are numbers changing on annual bird counts? And do you see any evidence of threats from climate change or human impacts?
Yeah, the long-tailed duck numbers I think are down quite a lot, and the murres are, because because the long-tailed ducks don't breed here, they go to the far north to breed. We don't really get a good sense. You don't often see them from shore, right? So you have to be out on boats to see them. So I think they get counted very poorly, to be honest. And this is what's happening with a lot of the seabirds is there are groups, thankfully, that do go out and do transects and are keeping track of birds on the ocean, spend days on the water, just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, um, and go out and do seabird surveys. But for most of us without boats, we're not really going to have a really good sense of the numbers. I think that there are some concerns, things like the short-tailed shearwaters being in our area in the numbers that they are now, when they normally would stay farther offshore. The salmon skulls, the same thing. Like it was awesome to see them, but they shouldn't be here, right? So that's not a good sign that they're here. A lot of the birds do suffer because of climate change because the fish that or the food that they're going after is very susceptible to temperature changes. So the fish and the shrimps and the invertebrates move, and the birds have to go with them, but that may take them away from where they need to be for breeding. So they're following the food, but it may not have them being in the right places at the right time for the species to do well, and they may not find the food, right? Like it may just be too far out of their ranges. So there's a lot happening with seabirds and seabird populations, and I wish that it was easier to monitor them.
That makes sense. And somebody just made a comment in the chat that they think they've seen frigate birds being jerk Jaeger types and is wondering if that's the same behavior.
Yeah, I believe it is the same. We actually had our very first magnificent frigate bird in Victoria this year, and no birders saw it. Like none. The light keeper at Trial Island snapped a couple of pictures going, "What the heck is that?" And it was like a most magnificent frigate bird. But not one birder got to see it.
Amazing. That's all the questions in the chat. Is there anyone who has one? I think, Gloria, I see your hand up. Anyone else can raise their hand and we'll go in turn.
Okay, yeah, we live in the Souk Basin, and there is a little island right out in front of our house with some trees on it, and some of the trees are like fairly tall Doug fir trees. And about a week ago, and there's quite typically two eagles that kind of land in the top of that tree. And about a week ago, we actually saw the one eagle jump on top of the other eagle. They clearly were having sex. And I kept thinking that the top branch was so skinny, I thought it was going to break. But the question I have is, what really surprised me is that they were doing this in the middle of November.
Yeah.
So like, I guess they could have sex at any time.
Yeah, they can. And just like the ducks, when I was talking about in the beginning, in the fall, pair bonding is important. So they're not actually producing eggs at this time of year. It is just practicing. right? It's not just humans that do that. And for the eagles, they are already working on their nests. You may see them flying at great speed, grabbing a branch so that it tears off, um, and they're renovating their nest because they are fairly e early breeders, eager beaver, eager beavers when it comes to breeding. So they do pair bonding behaviors as well, and so that's probably what you witnessed.
Yeah, their nest is somewhere else. Like we don't
Yeah.
know where their nest is. I think there's.
Um, it could be down at Spirit Bear. There's one down there, not too far from where you are, I think. Um,
Oh,
and
oh,
um, there's quite a few in the area.
okay.
Cool. We had one more question come in the chat. Do you have a favorite ID guide?
I am a bit techie, and so Sibley's Guide on my phone is probably my favorite. But I bought Amar's Gull book. I haven't consumed it yet, but I keep saying I'm going to get better at gulls, and so oh, and someone has put that there's an app called Gullible, which I didn't even know about. So there you go. So I'm going to have to check that one out. Um, Thank you for that suggestion. I definitely will check that one out. Seabirds and gulls and shorebirds are hard, right? Like, they're kind of the next level. If when people are getting into birds, I would not tell them to start there. I would say, start somewhere else. Seabirds in summer are not too bad, but we don't get a lot of them in the summer. That's the thing, right? Um, so yeah, you really do want to look at things that you can feel good about having identified something, not going, well, it was a grebe, or maybe a loon, or maybe a cormorant. It's because they're not the easiest birds for sure.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Well, I'm just going to switch you very shortly over to owls to tell you that right now Rocky Point Bird Observatory is having a favorite owl contest where we posted 10 pictures of northern saw-whet owls we banded this year, and you're welcome to go in and cast a vote for the one that you think is favorite. So rpbo.org if you'd like to be judgy about owls.
Amazing. Excellent. So thanks for that website, and we can all go and put our votes in for the owls. But I'd like
Thank you
to
very
thank
much for
you
having me.
yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a fantastic talk, and we really appreciate your time.
Pleasure to be here.
Great.
Bye
Take
for
care,
now.
everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.